I stared in disbelief at the muddy wasteland that once was my brother James's award-winning garden. 6 years of therapeutic planting, his sanctuary after 3 tours in Afghanistan, reduced to churned dirt and broken stems in a single afternoon. Wooden plaques from the Riverside Garden Association lay shattered among uprooted rose bushes and crushed vegetables. My hands shook as I unfolded the bright yellow notice stapled to his front door. Unauthorized landscaping removal completed. And $200 remediation fee applied to your account. Pine Ridge Estates, HOA. James had asked me to house-sit while he was in the state capitol for his first legislative session as our district's newly elected senator. "Just water the tomatoes and make sure nobody messes with my flag," he'd said with a laugh. Some house-sitter I turned out to be. I'd gone grocery shopping for 2 hours and returned to find this devastation. The garden had been James's lifeline after coming home with a Purple Heart and combat PTSD. His therapist had recommended horticulture therapy, and my brother had thrown himself into it completely. What began as a few tomato plants had evolved into a stunning arrangement of native flowers, vegetables, and a small memorial section with plants representing each member of his unit who didn't make it home. I pulled out my phone and took dozens of photos, documenting everything from different angles. My blood boiled when I realized they'd even bulldozed the memorial corner with the small military boots planted with forget-me-nots through the gap where the tall sunflowers had once provided privacy. I spotted Victor Chambers from across the street watching me with undisguised satisfaction. As the HOA president's right-hand man, Victor had complained about James's garden at every meeting, calling it an unsightly vegetable patch that lowered property values. I marched inside and dialed the HOA management office, my heart hammering with rage. "Pine Ridge Estates, this is Deborah speaking. This is Melissa Taylor, James Taylor's sister from 47 Oakwood Drive. I just found my brother's entire garden bulldozed with a massive fine on his door. I need to know who authorized this destruction and why." "One moment, Miss Taylor." I heard, typing on a keyboard. "Yes, we received multiple complaints about the unsanctioned agricultural use of front yard space. The board voted on it Tuesday. Didn't your brother receive our email notification?" "He's been in the state capitol all week, and his garden was fully approved 3 years ago by the previous board. I have copies of all the paperwork." Deborah's voice turned frosty. "The current board has determined that growing vegetables in front yards violates our new aesthetic guidelines. The decision was unanimous." "That's impossible. I want to speak to Elaine Winters right now." "The board president is unavailable. You can file a formal appeal, but the remediation fee stands. The work has been completed." I hung up and paced the living room, fury building with each step. James had followed every rule to the letter. He'd submitted diagrams, attended meetings, even installed additional drip irrigation at his own expense to satisfy their water conservation requirements. The garden had been featured twice in the local newspaper as an example of beautiful, sustainable landscaping. As I photographed the destruction for evidence, a gleaming black Cadillac Escalade slowed in front of the house. Elaine Winters, HOA president and local real estate agent, rolled down her window. Her perfectly highlighted blonde hair didn't move as she tilted her head in mock sympathy. "The front looks much more appropriate now, Melissa. The whole neighborhood thanks James for finally complying with our updated standards." My hands clenched into fists. "He was already in compliance, Elaine. You know that. This was trespassing and destruction of private property." Elaine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "The board has authority to remedy violations after proper notification. Perhaps your brother should check his emails more regularly. You targeted him specifically," I called out, "just like you did to the Rodriguez family last month with their wheelchair ramp." Her window stopped halfway, Be careful with accusations, Melissa. This community operates on rules and respect. Some people just struggle with both. The Escalade pulled away, leaving me standing amid the ruins of my brother's healing space. Looked down at my phone as it buzzed with a calendar notification. It was an automatic reminder about James's committee assignments that I'd synced from his calendar. There it was, in black and white. First meeting, State Housing and Community Development Committee, override authority on all HOA regulatory bodies. My fury transformed into something more powerful, determination. Elaine Winters had no idea that the garden she'd just bulldozed belonged to the newly appointed chairman of the very committee that oversaw HOA governance for the entire state. The committee with the power to investigate complaints, audit finances, and even disband HOAs that violated state regulations. I smiled for the first time since discovering the destruction. Elaine thought she wielded all the power in Pine Ridge Estates, but she'd just declared war on the wrong family. That evening, I sat at James's kitchen table surrounded by 3 years of HOA documents he'd meticulously organized and stored. My brother might struggle with nightmares from combat, but his military precision with paperwork was flawless. Every approval, every board meeting minute, every communication was labeled, dated, and filed. I pulled out the original garden approval signed by the previous board president. The document explicitly stated that the approval remains valid regardless of board changes, provided maintenance standards are met. I also found the special exemption granted to James under the Veterans Affairs Rehabilitation Program, which the HOA had proudly publicized when James first moved in. Through the windows, I noticed unusual activity at Elaine's massive colonial across the street. Board members' luxury vehicles lined her circular driveway for what appeared to be an unscheduled meeting. Robert Chen, the only board member who occasionally challenged Elaine, parked at the curb instead of in the driveway. He checked his surroundings with a worried expression before hurrying inside. I made a note to speak with Robert tomorrow. If Elaine was calling emergency meetings, something beyond James's garden was happening in Pine Ridge Estates. My phone rang. It was James. I took a deep breath, unsure how to tell him about his destroyed sanctuary. "Hey, Mel, how's everything?" "At the house?" His voice sounded tired but happy. The new position was demanding but fulfilling for him after years of struggling to find purpose. "James, something happened today. I need you to stay calm when I tell you. What is it? Is the house okay? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but the HOA bulldozed your entire garden today while I was at the grocery store. They left a $1,200 fine on the door." The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 10 seconds. "James, are you there? The whole garden? Even the memorial corner?" His voice had gone frighteningly quiet. "Everything. They destroyed it all." "I'm so sorry. I was only gone for 2 hours." Another long pause. "This isn't your fault, Mel." His voice hardened with the calm control I recognized from when he'd talk about difficult combat situations. "Tell me exactly what happened." I recounted. Everything. The bulldozer tracks, the confrontation with Elaine, the destruction of the military boot planters. With each detail, the background noise on James's end grew quieter, as if he was moving to a more private location. "I've taken photos of everything," I assured him, "and I've found all your approval paperwork." "Good. I have another copy of everything here too." Papers shuffled on his end. "I'm adding something to tomorrow's committee agenda. Don't tell them." "I'm coming home." "What are you going to do?" "First, I'm calling Mark Ellison at the Attorney General's office. He owes me a favor. Then I'm going to let Elaine dig herself a little deeper." I heard the steel in his voice that had helped him lead troops through crisis situations. "I'll be home Thursday evening. Until then, don't file any official complaints. Just document everything. And Mel, check if Alondra Rodriguez still has her wheelchair ramp paperwork. We might need it. After hanging up, I couldn't sleep. Through my bedroom window, I watched as Elaine's meeting broke up around midnight. Board members hurried to their cars, faces tense. Robert Chen was the last to leave, lingering in the driveway until Elaine closed her front door. Then he did something unexpected. He walked directly toward James's house. I met him at the door before he could knock. "Ms. Taylor, I'm Robert Chen from the HOA board. May I speak with you privately?" I hesitated, then invited him in, leaving. The door conspicuously open. Robert declined to sit. "I want you to know I wasn't at the meeting where they voted to remove the garden. I was out of town at my daughter's college graduation. They deliberately scheduled it when I couldn't attend." "Why are you telling me this?" He lowered his voice. "Because what they did wasn't just cruel, it was illegal. They didn't follow proper voting procedures, and they deliberately misinterpreted the bylaws. Why would they target James specifically?" Robert glanced toward the door, then back at me. "Pinecrest Development wants to buy 5 properties on this block to build luxury townhomes. They need at least 80% owner participation. Your brother has been vocal about preserving the character of the neighborhood and refused to sell. Let me guess, Elaine is the listing agent for the development." Robert nodded. 20% commission on the entire project, but there's more. They've been using HOA funds to pressure certain homeowners to sell. Selective enforcement, excessive fines, even property damage disguised as maintenance. I've been gathering evidence, but they outvote me on everything. Why risk telling me this? Because I served too. Army Corps of Engineers. When I saw what happened to a fellow veteran's property, he shook his head in disgust. "There are lines you don't cross." As Robert turned to leave, he paused. "They don't know your brother's position in the legislature, do they?" I smiled. "Elaine thinks he's just a Veterans Affairs coordinator. They have no idea he chairs the Housing Committee." Robert's eyes widened slightly. "Thursday's board meeting should be interesting. They're planning to finalize the sale requirements." After he left, I sent James a detailed update. His reply came immediately. "Perfect timing. Tell Robert to be there Thursday with all his evidence. I'm bringing friends." Morning. Light revealed more damage than I'd initially seen. The bulldozer had compacted the soil so severely that puddles formed from the overnight rain, creating a muddy swamp where James's carefully structured garden beds had been. The water seeped dangerously close to his home's foundation. Exactly the type of problem his drainage system had been designed to prevent. I methodically photographed the new damage, feeling a grim satisfaction as I documented evidence of potential structural harm that directly contradicted the HOA's claim of remediation. Just as I finished, I spotted Victor Chambers setting up a sprinkler system on his newly sodded lawn during water restriction hours. The hypocrisy was stunning. James had been issued warnings twice last summer for watering his vegetables 10 minutes outside the approved window, while Victor openly flouted the rules without consequences. I spent the morning contacting the Rodriguez family about their wheelchair ramp. Maria Rodriguez invited me over, and I was shocked to find her husband Manuel struggling to navigate their steep front steps with his prosthetic leg. The ramp that had been there 2 weeks ago, properly permitted through both the HOA and the city, was gone. "They came last Thursday," Maria explained, serving me coffee at their kitchen table, "said the ramp violated new aesthetic guidelines. Tore it out while Manuel was at physical therapy and left us a $900 bill. Did you appeal?" Manuel's face darkened. 3 times. Elaine said the medical exemption doesn't override the new neighborhood character preservation rules they passed last month. "Would you be willing to testify about this at the board meeting tomorrow night?" They exchanged glances. "We can't afford any more fines," Maria said hesitantly. "I don't think that will be a problem after tomorrow," I assured them. "My brother is coming home specifically for this meeting. At noon, I received a text from an unknown number. 'City inspector coming to your brother's property today. Anonymous complaint about code violations. R.C. Roberts' warning came just in time. 30 minutes later, a city truck pulled up and a tired-looking inspector named Dave approached with a clipboard. Got a complaint about unpermitted landscape changes and potential drainage issues at this address, he explained. I smiled and invited him to inspect everything thoroughly. I'd actually appreciate your professional assessment of the drainage problems created yesterday when the HOA bulldozed this property without proper permits or notice. Dave's eyebrows shot up. The HOA did this? I showed him the before photos of James's garden with its carefully engineered water management system, then the destruction and resulting water pooling. Dave took meticulous notes, his professional demeanor slipping as he surveyed the damage. This is completely unauthorized work, he concluded. They needed city permits for earth-moving operations this extensive, especially on a corner lot, with drainage implications for the whole block. He handed me his card. I'm citing them for 3 code violations. This will go directly to my supervisor. As Dave was leaving, a sleek town car pulled up. Victoria Palmer, the real estate developer, behind Pinecrest, stepped out with Elaine. They stopped short, seeing the city inspector at James's property. Is there a problem here, Dave? Victoria called out, her voice honeyed but sharp. Just responding to a complaint, Ms. Palmer, Dave replied neutrally. Turns out there are several code violations from unpermitted bulldozing. Victoria's smile tightened as she turned to Elaine, whispering urgently. They retreated to the town car without approaching further, but not before Victoria shot me a calculating look. My phone buzzed with a text from James. AG's office sending observer to tomorrow's meeting. Keep documenting everything. How's the Rodriguez situation? I updated him about the wheelchair ramp and sent photos. His response was immediate. Perfect. Building inspector and ADA compliance officer will accompany me tomorrow. Don't tell anyone I'm coming. That evening, I noticed Robert Chen's car parked down the street. He appeared to be photographing HOA violations on properties not targeted for the development deal. A strategic collection of evidence. The next morning, I found another notice. On James's door, this time, a landscaping mandatory correction notice with a 48-hour deadline to install board-approved sod at our expense. Attached was a convenient quote from Premier Landscapes, a company that, according to the business card, just happened to be owned by Elaine's husband. The quote was astronomical, $4,500 for basic sod installation. At the bottom, a handwritten note, failure to comply will result in the HOA completing the work with an additional 50% emergency service fee. I was photographing this latest outrage when Robert approached cautiously. They're pushing hard because the development deal closes next week, he said quietly. Victoria Palmer needs the holdout properties secured before her investor's deadline. On Monday, how much is Elaine making on this deal? Nearly $500,000 in commissions, plus a community consultant position with Pinecrest paying $10,000 monthly for the next 2 years. I whistled softly. That explains the motivation. There's more, Robert whispered. They've been using HOA reserve funds to pay for property improvements that only benefit the development, new utility connections, preliminary architectural drawings. It's completely illegal. Do you have proof? Robert patted his laptop bag. Every transaction for the past 3 years. I'm an accountant. They made me treasurer thinking I'd just sign off on everything. Big mistake. As Robert left, Elaine's Escalade cruised slowly past, her watchful eyes tracking his movement from my house to his own. The HOA president had no idea that in less than 8 hours, her carefully constructed kingdom would face the one force more powerful than a determined real estate developer, a United States senator with personal reasons for justice. Thunder rumbled. Overhead, as I pulled into the crowded community center parking lot, An unusual number of cars filled the spaces for a Thursday night HOA meeting that typically drew only board members and a handful of disgruntled residents. Word had clearly spread about recent events. I recognized vehicles belonging to homeowners who'd faced similar violations over the past year. The Patels with their disputed fence, elderly Mrs. Kaminsky, who'd been fined for her bird feeders, the Washingtons, who'd battled over their children's basketball hoop. Tonight's audience wouldn't be the passive group Elaine was accustomed to bullying. As I gathered my documents, a convoy of 3 official-looking black SUVs turned into the lot, parking in the reserved spaces near the entrance. My pulse quickened. James had arrived, and not alone. Inside, the meeting room buzzed with tense conversations that hushed as I entered. Residents filled every folding chair with more standing along the walls. Elaine and her board members sat at the front table. Looking uncomfortably at the unexpected turnout, Victor nervously shuffled papers while glancing toward the door. Robert Chen gave me a subtle nod from his isolated seat at the far end of the board table. I took one of the few remaining chairs in the front row and opened my laptop, connecting to the room's projector system as a concerned resident with a presentation. Elaine's eyes narrowed as she watched me, but her attention quickly shifted to Manuel Rodriguez, being wheeled in by his wife. The combat veteran's military service medals were prominently displayed on his jacket. Behind them, other affected homeowners, filed in with stern expressions. At exactly 7 p.m., Elaine tapped the microphone, her diamond rings catching the fluorescent light. "Welcome, everyone, to our monthly Pine Ridge Estates board meeting," she began with a practiced smile. "We have a full agenda tonight, so we'll limit public comments to our registered speakers only. First, I'd like to address the recent landscape remediation projects the board has undertaken to maintain our community standards." The community center doors swung open, and the room fell silent. James stood in the doorway in his full military dress uniform, the medals on his chest and his senator's pin clearly visible. Behind him were 2 uniformed police officers, a woman in a business suit carrying a legal briefcase, and 3 men with official badges clipped to their jackets. Elaine's voice faltered. "Senator Taylor, we weren't expecting you back from the Capitol until next week." "Clearly," James replied, his calm voice carrying authority as he walked to the front of the room. "I decided my presence was needed here after learning about recent actions taken against my property and the properties of my neighbors." Elaine's smile stiffened. "If this is about the landscaping violation, there's a proper appeals process. This is about far more than my garden, Ms. Winters." James turned to address the room. "For those who don't know me beyond the guy with the vegetable garden, I'm State Senator James Taylor. I chair the Housing and Community Development Committee, which oversees all homeowners association regulations in this state." Murmurs spread through the crowd as James continued. "After my property was illegally bulldozed in my absence, I initiated an official investigation into the operations of this HOA board." He gestured to the group behind him. "Allow me to introduce Deputy Attorney General Marquez, Building Commissioner Wilson, ADA Compliance Officer Patel, and Detectives Ramirez and Johnson from the Financial Crimes Division." Victor half rose from his seat, his face ashen. "This is highly irregular. You can't just bring law enforcement to an HOA meeting without—" "Actually, he can," Deputy AG Marquez interrupted, stepping forward. "We have sufficient evidence to justify a formal investigation into multiple violations of state HOA governance laws, Americans with Disabilities Act non-compliance, and potential financial misappropriation." Elaine's composure cracked. "This is absurd. Everything we've done has been within our authority as outlined in the community bylaws." James approached the board table. "Is it within your authority to target specific homeowners who refuse to sell to Pinecrest Development? Is It within your authority to use HOA reserve funds to prepare properties for a private development deal? Is it within your authority to award exclusive contracts to landscaping companies owned by your husband? The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Robert Chen stood up at the board table. As HOA treasurer, I've compiled documentation of every questionable financial transaction for the past 3 years. He placed a thick folder on the table, including the $57,000 of reserve funds used to install new utility connections that only benefit the 5 properties targeted for development. Detective Johnson took the folder while Elaine sputtered protests. You're all overreacting to standard HOA operations. The board voted on these measures without proper notice, without proper quorum, and often without proper documentation, James countered. And then there's the matter of ADA violations. Manuel Rodriguez raised his hand. They ripped out my wheelchair ramp last week, said it violated aesthetic guidelines. ADA Officer Patel frowned. That's a direct violation of federal law regardless of HOA bylaws. Commissioner Wilson stepped forward. We've also confirmed that the bulldozing operations conducted on Senator Taylor's property and others were performed without required city permits, creating drainage issues that threaten property foundations and public infrastructure. I connected my laptop to the projector, and photos of James's destroyed garden appeared on the screen, followed by documentation of other targeted properties, drainage problems, and the Rodriguez's missing ramp. The board meeting minutes show no proper vote was taken on my brother's property, I explained, advancing through my presentation. And the city has no record of permits being filed for any of these remediation projects. Elaine stood abruptly. This meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene after consulting our attorney. Sit down, Ms. Winters, James said firmly. This meeting will continue, but with a slight change in agenda. Deputy AG Marquez placed a document on the table. This is an emergency injunction, freezing all HOA financial activities pending our investigation. Additionally, we're issuing temporary restraining orders, preventing this board from taking any further action against homeowners' properties. Detective Ramirez addressed the stunned board members. We'll need statements from each of you regarding your knowledge of the financial arrangements with Pinecrest Development and Premier Landscapes. As the residents realized what was happening, spontaneous applause broke out. James waited for it to subside before continuing. As of this moment, I'm initiating emergency oversight provisions under State Code 47.3. which allows for temporary receivership of homeowners associations found to be in substantial violation of governance laws. He turned to the residents. This means an independent administrator will be appointed to review all HOA activities until proper elections can be held. Elaine's face had gone from flushed to pale. You can't do this. I've run this community for 8 years. That's precisely the problem, Ms. Winters, James replied. HOAs aren't meant to be run by a single person, especially one with significant financial conflicts of interest. 1 month later, I helped James plant the first seedlings in his newly redesigned garden. The rich soil had been properly remediated after the bulldozer damage, and the layout now included wider paths to make it accessible for Manuel Rodriguez, who had become James's gardening partner. Senator, are you sure you want to put the tomatoes there? Manuel called from his wheelchair, pointing to a sunny corner. They'll shade out your peppers by June. James laughed, moving the seedling trays. I defer to your expertise, Master Gardener Rodriguez. The new community garden project, funded by the settlement from Pinecrest Development and the former board members, spread across what had been an unused common area. Residents who had once been silenced by Elaine's regime now worked side by side, trading gardening tips and building connections. Mail's here, I announced, bringing over a thick official envelope. Looks like the final report from the state investigation. James wiped his hands on his jeans and opened it, scanning the contents with a satisfied smile. Elaine and Victor are permanently barred from serving on any HOA board in the state, he read. The financial restitution payments will be divided among all affected homeowners, and the new democratically elected board structure has been approved. Robert Chen approached with a tray of lemonade for the gardeners. As the interim HOA president, he had implemented transparent governance practices that were becoming a model for other communities. The Attorney General wants to use our case to draft new HOA accountability legislation, Robert said, handing out drinks. They're calling it the Garden Protection Act. Perfect name, James replied, looking around at what had risen from the destruction. Sometimes you have to clear away the weeds to let something better grow. As the evening sun cast a golden glow over the flourishing community garden, neighbors who had once lived in fear of arbitrary rules now worked together, building something far more valuable than property values. They were building a true community. Bulldozer meant to destroy one man's healing place had instead broken ground for an entire neighborhood's renewal. Sometimes justice grows from unexpected seeds. Has your HOA ever crossed the line? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you enjoyed this true story of justice served, hit that subscribe button and notification bell to catch our next video about regular people standing up to corrupt power. New videos every Wednesday. Remember to check out our community support resources for HOA disputes in the description below. Sometimes the most powerful tool against injustice is simply knowing your rights.